Hi there, I'm back. Okay, I got all the good names out there, and I gave you the scenario and I gave you the timeline. We're talking about probably the late 90s in San Francisco, and I was being brought in for assessment. And those of you who are in any institution, whether it's corporate or academic or whatever, you are constantly being assessed and appraised. And it's usually done in eating situations. It's being done in social settings because that's when you let down, typically, especially if there's been drinking. I'm not a drinker, so I never let down. Thank you, Nadia. Thank you, Horsense. But you're constantly being scrutinized, not just the way you hold your spoon or your fork, but they want to see where your head's at and see whether you're trustworthy to be advanced to the next level of corruption. And and by the time I was, coming to these banquets, I pretty much knew the modus operandi of the recruiters, and I knew what was there for. And by the way, after this event, I was never contacted or never invited back by this group. For one thing, I showed up with a woman, so if I showed up with a guy, it might have been a different story. But I showed up with my hot girlfriend, so that sent out a powerful signal that I'm sorry, I'm not interested. Um, and that also happened to me, by the way, when I went down to University of Southern California, the Annenberg School. I was also brought down there to advance the GLBT agenda for Asian American people because I'm a media specialist. I'm a film and television media expert, right? And what I say and what I write has a lot of weight behind it. At least it did, right? Until I was pushed out. But baby, I'm coming back even stronger. I don't care how many times you want to end my stream. It doesn't really matter at this point. And you will find it. You censors out there, you're going to find your own history and your own future through what I'm about to tell you. So why don't you tune in along with all the fine people here in the live chat? You're going to learn something about yourself. Maybe you're afraid of that. Okay. So I was down there at the banquet, and of course, my curiosity was such that I had to look up who the principals were. And I found out that this guy, Gilbert H. Hurt, was very much, as I suspected, into intergenerational sex. Should we call same sex intergenerational sex? And I found this article just recently by a guy named Seth Palmer. This is public information, so I'm not outing or doxing anybody. He's lists himself here as a postdoctoral fellow at the Carter G. Woodson Institute, the University of Virginia, Charlottesville. Notice he's a postdoctoral fellow. He's got his PhD. Now they're beginning to work on him, saying, listen, if you want a job in academia, we're going to give you these little foundation grants or little, and I've had them. I'm a Fulbrighter. I had a Rockefeller fellowship, blah, blah, blah. That's how they bring you in without asking anything of you. They don't say you have to promote this agenda or this. It's assessment. They want to see if you will go along with the larger agenda, which is not rolled out yet. They want to see what you're made out of attitudinally, your own psychology. Excuse me. So this guy is falling for the bait. And he has an entry here. And by the way, Carter G. Woodson was a famous Black intellectual. So I'm assuming this person is African American because they want to get all the groups online. They wanted me for the Asian American people. The Black community almost entirely, in talking about the intellectual, the law profession, legislative, elective officials, they've been pretty much wrapped up. The only ones that haven't been wrapped up are the rappers, right? People like Professor Griff, Public Enemy, and there's some individual. I think D'Angelo is not going along with the program, and the ones that do get off the train there, they meet. Really, not very pleasant fates. But for the most part, your filmmakers. What's the guy who did Get Out, right, or the movie Us, US? Forgot his name. I'm trying to go as fast as I can here. They're read into the program, right? So this guy in the academic world is being read in, and guess what he's writing about? He's writing about what Gilbert Hurt specialized in, rituals, and I'm reading his title here, rituals and same-sex and trans experience. And he's writing about ritualized homosexuality in Melanesia, which happens to be the specialty of Gilbert Hertz as an anthropologist. And he cites Gilbert Hertz here via Michel Foucault. Reading very quickly, so scholarship on Melanesian male initiation rites in Papua New Guinea became a particularly powerful reminder to the West that same-sex sexual behavior needed to be disentangled from identity categories. No male, no female, no gay, no straight, right? That's what he's saying here. The argument famously articulated by Michel Foucault, 1978, in his charting of the creation of the modern quote unquote homosexual, because that term has gone out, as you know. The most celebrated work on quote unquote ritualized homosexuality, a category that described the process through which semen was transmitted orally or anally, in parentheses, depending on the culture, by unmarried men to their young male initiates, was undoubtedly Gilbert H. Hertz's seminal, I guess that's not a play on words, is it? Undoubtedly, Gilbert H. Hertz's seminal Guardians of the Flutes, 1981. I have read that book. I'm reading more of his recent one. Hertz's work became a paradigmatic case study of how gender and sexuality were conceptualized differently outside the West. And it was regularly taught in university courses on anthropology of gender and sexuality. So you see that work there migrated into the schools of education, the law schools, the history department, all the undergraduates now by 2 or 3 generations have been inculcated in this new paradigm that was supposedly brought in by Michel Foucault, which is based upon dominance and submission, because the relationship between the older male in Melanesian society and that of the younger Melanesian is an unequal power relationship, with the man is having his way with his subordinate, in order to initiate him into the ranks of the leadership. And they're using these, and this is what anthropologists have done, not just her in the past. They use anthropological cases in order to advance a certain agenda, a political, social, cultural agenda here in the United States. A great example is Margaret Mead. She did a classic work on sexuality amongst Polynesian girls. And later on, another anthropologist, I forgot his name, I think it's Derek Freeman, did a whole book on Margaret Mead. By the way, she was married to Gregory Bateson, who was one of the great Five Eyes psyops experts, another anthropologist. But Margaret Mead did this book called Coming of Age in Samoa, where she talks about how these categories of male, female were fluid, and intergenerational categories were not quite defined as those of us in the West, and that book was embraced by all the foundations, and it later became part of the knowledge base that we now learn today as the GLBQ2T agenda. Now, what is the problem with that? Well, Derek Freeman found out in this book about that he devoted strictly to, especially to Margaret Mead, that he went back to the Samoa, and he went down to checked out her anthropological research. For one thing, she wasn't there very long. It's a story, it's a fairy tale. She did not live with these people for years and years to learn the folkways. She never learned the language. Moreover, she found out that the people there, by then the Samoans, the native people, had seen any number of anthropologists come to their village, coming from France, from Britain, and then, Margaret Mead was an American. So America, because anthropology is a colonial discipline. So they had seen these people. By the time Margaret Mead showed up, they were pulling her leg. They were telling her all kinds of stories. They were just having her on, as they say in Britain. And she wrote this up as anthropological research. So I encourage you, and I encouraged all my students, that if they're ever being brought in as informants, native informants anthropologically, or if they sign up for some sort of harebrained behavioral science experiment at the university, because that's what they use undergraduates for, by the way. They're not really there to learn anything. They're there to be used as experimental test subjects, and also to be inculcated with this fake Foucauldian postmodern. Some people call it cultural Marxism. That doesn't really explain anything. That's another one of those memes, those sort of NLP memes that I hope you get away from. I'm only mentioning it now because now you understand how the name calling doesn't really have any effect. But they're inculcated with this. But their real agenda, of course, is to impose this post-human system, which, by the way, even they will be eliminated. So the faster we get to them and have them understand, the people who bought into this, the faster we're going to be able to disentangle ourselves from this biopolitical enslavement. And that is a concept, before I get cut off again, that is a concept that I think that comes out of Foucault that we can appropriate for ourselves. Biopolitics, that's the terminology. That's the concept. He conflates biology with politics. That was his genius. He saw that as a positive movement. He saw biopolitical control as an improvement of oppressive state-level dictatorships, for example, or oligarchies. He saw it definitely as an improvement over monarchies, top-down from the nobility. He saw the rule of the biopolitical elite as being a liberatory step for humanity. He's been proven wrong as of last year, almost to the day, March, right? Well, it's been 13 months now since the curtain began to descend. The handlers read Foucault. They said, yes, we can use this concept of biopolitics in order to put a gimp gag in the entire of humanity. And we're going to promote his work at the schools of education. We're going to teach all the K-12 people, the same Foucauldian orthodoxy, and we're going to valorize everybody who's in the GLBT community. We're going to saturate the media with all of that material, and not because we like them. In fact, we hate them. We hate everybody. We hold all of humanity in contempt. But just like we use group X, Y, and Z to take our agenda forth before, the proletariat, whatever, the people who were looking for change and revolution, the social. And by the way, Foucault was a disappointed Marxist. Like any good French intellectual, he had been exposed to Marxism, and he thought that there was going to be some sort of proletarian revolution that would bring equality and end capitalism forever. So he came up with this notion of, well, the biopolitical is going to be the next step forward. That's why he's so important to talk about today, ladies and gentlemen. That's why I thank you for sticking with me for the 4 or 5 or 6 interruptions. You have the name Michel Foucault, and you also have his critical intervention. It's called Biopolitics. And I'm going to put that into the language of independent media. I want you to start using biopolitics in your casual conversation. Right? Not medical martial law done by some psyops guy living in Japan for some unknown reason, but biopolitics. That's really what it comes down to. And kind of, if you want to look it up and see how it's in your search engine and see how it's defined. And it's defined in very flattering, positive terms. I see it as a term of enslavement. And the irony is that very few people know about it. How many of you in the chat room know? Not that I'm better than you. I'm just saying that what happened is that we have been diverted. We have been distracted by our own people, supposedly in indie media, who will not talk about the biopolitics of the globalist lockdown. All right. It's a power exchange, like the sadomasochistic 50 Shades of Grey, which was, I guess, owes to the whole milieu that Foucault and others helped to create. And now we're seeing the widespread political manifestation of this BDSM concept that Foucault was promoting in his private life as being liberation. How can being in bondage, how can being masked up and have a gimp ball put in your mask and wrapped up in saran wrap until you're suffocated, how can that be liberation? Well, That's going to be another talk when I get into the whole French occult tradition. Even Jules Verne, the person who wrote 50,000 great childhood books, man, he was deep. He was read in, baby. And you can believe that Foucault comes out of this bag, as well as this other sickie called Georges Bataille, right? We got to get into the French occultic, esoteric tradition, going back to the Templars, going back to the Rennes de Chateau, Chateau de Vin, the Bougainville revolution, the people down in the southern France, all the heretics there, Jacques de Molay, all that stuff that you like to watch on YouTube, just like I do. It's for real.